are these people?
I have a really long Fuck Israel segment this week, so everybody buckle up because this is going to take a little while. Consortium News, another Indie Media Award honoree, one of the top outlets. They did a refresh on their WordPress website earlier this year. Go support them. I believe they're doing a fund drive. They are a 501c3, so all your donations there are tax deductible if you do choose to do so. Patrick Lawrence is one of their exclusive writers that they feature. He's also over on Substack at The Flautist, but he's been censored on Twitter for years, since the Jack Dorsey days. All right. And he wrote this article that I thought was interesting, and from the perspective of being Jewish myself, I don't really get, I try not to aggrandize the position of here's how it's affecting Jews worldwide, because who gives a shit, number one. Number two, it's being Jewish done and facilitated in the name of Judaism. So while, yes, it's bad, it's up to Jews to call that out, and I do regularly, but so what he's saying is, here's a letter. This very welcome letter marks out the significantly worsening alienation between world Jewry and the Zionist defacement of the Judaic tradition. And we've been saying very often, Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism is not Zionism. That's the first thing that we say all the time, is that the Zionists have twisted the Jewish religion, which had existed for thousands of years before Zionism, to turn it into and morph it into this ultra-nationalistic, disgusting, racist, apartheid, whatever you want to call ideology, political ideology, that they then utilize and twist as a religion. So Patrick Lawrence writes this special to Consortium News. At last, Jews with powerful voices have gathered en masse. A critical mass, I would say, to condemn Israel and the savage spree of murder, starvation, and terror it inflicts as we speak upon the Palestinians of Gaza and the occupied territories of the West Bank. Honestly, I would say not loudly enough. You may by now be aware of the open letter signed by the 450 plus American, European, and Israeli Jews and made public this week. In it, this sprawling group of distinguished personages denounces the criminality of the Zionist regime and asserts the universality of justice and the fair and equal application of international law. The signatories also call for the international community to impose immediate sanctions on apartheid Israel. When you've got Jews that are out there calling for sanctions on Israel, that means something. That's a statement. And that's what he's saying. This is very big in my read. And I say this not because of what's in this document. Calls for justice of this kind are by now many, but straight to my point, whose names are in it. He said, you may know of this letter, and you may not. I ought to add that The Guardian reported it in its October 22nd edition. Okay. The Turkish Wire Service, AA, also had the story right away. Arab News had it. So did Middle East Monitor, and the New Indian Express and Stateside Common Dreams even picked it up. Indie Media Award honoree. In Britain, Jewish Voice for Liberation picked it up. But the British Daily is at writing alone, okay, among major Western media, to report on this momentous call for worldwide action against the Zionist state. We read nothing of it in major Western media, no surprise, and hear nothing from mainstream broadcasters. Of course not. They're under orders. I'll return to this important point shortly. Join the Worldwide Jewish Call, the letter is titled. It was organized and put out by an apparently ad hoc coalition called Jews Demand Action. Now remember that subversive groups are also funded sometimes, and they also fund both sides of an opposition, and kind of, I want to hear more about this. The document and various appendages explaining it are here. All right. As the Jews Demand Action website makes clear, the intent is to announce a continually engaged movement in the cause of justice. Fair justice for Palestinians, justice for the Zionist fanatics guilty of perpetrating a genocide, which is a term that the group uses with obvious conviction and also with obvious anger. I can understand why. Among much else, the letter features a form by way of which Jews can sign the petition and receive updates on actions to come. I would not advise signing that petition because God only knows where your information is going to go at that point and what kind of list you're going to get on at that point. Quote, at last, a serious global Jewish call for sanctions on Israel. JVL came out and proclaimed, yes, at last. Lots of other Jews have stood publicly against the apartheid state, many for a long time. There's Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, right? The wonderfully outspoken rabbi and author of The Empty Wagon, which is Zionism's journey from identity crisis to identity theft. There's the aforementioned Jewish Voice for Peace and the Jewish organizations and students that are active on university campuses and the streets of major cities. Unqualified praise to them and the many like them I cannot list in full. And we were behind them 100% when they were protesting and sleeping on college campuses, trying to convince people that this was something serious, that their futures were impacted, and they wanted to see this ended. And they didn't want their universities funding this and investing their endowments in this. Patrick Lawrence, again, the flautist, continues for Consortium News. I have no certain idea why it took these hundreds of influential people with self-evident consciences so long to join these others against the entity that insists on calling itself the Jewish state. That's where I'm with him. The hazardous surmise: the past 2 years of Israel's unspeakable barbarism have surely been a torment for the signatories of this letter, as for countless Jews the world over, as they've sought to distinguish their faith and their traditions from the conduct of the ultra-nationalist regime that's supposed to merit their allegiance, but has emphatically lost it. Yes. If I had to choose one sentence in this letter above all others for its significance and power, I would rather not, but I will. It would be this, quote, our solidarity with Palestinians is not a betrayal of Judaism then, but a fulfillment of it, because you're supposed to love your neighbor. After this truth comes these, quote, when our sages taught to destroy one life is to destroy an entire world, they didn't carve exceptions for Palestinians. We shall not rest until this ceasefire carries forward into an end of occupation and apartheid. Unquote. This is the conceptual frame within which the signatories address Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, as well as, quote, presidents, prime ministers, heads of state, and permanent representatives to the United Nations. A strongly worded letter. While approving of the ceasefire, or what remains of it at this point, the strongly worded letter states, quote, and yet there should be no doubt that this ceasefire is fragile. Israeli forces remain in Gaza. The agreement makes no reference to the West Bank. The underlying conditions of occupation, apartheid, and the denial of Palestinian rights remain unaddressed. And oh yeah, right of return also remains unaddressed. The letter continues and says, quote, as Jews and human beings, we declare not in our name. Then it lists the 4 key demands that the signatories advance in their names. And at least this one has a demand. Respect for the authority of the International Court of Justice. Yes, but respect my authority. Really? A rejection of the complicity that Western governments have forced upon their citizens. Okay. A full military withdrawal. Absolutely. And the supply of aid and everything else needed to reconstruct Gaza. And then finally, of course, to refute false accusations of anti-Semitism that abusively deploy our collective history to tarnish those with whom we stand together in the pursuit of peace and justice. Yes, again, times 10. Yes, not using the definition of anti-Semitism being anyone that opposes Israel's apartheid and murdering of Palestinian babies. Yes, absolutely. You find some big names among the signatories, and the letter doesn't give the full list. Daniel Levy, who was previously a peace negotiator for Israel and now a prominent critic. You got Gabor Mate and Wallace Shawn, Peter Bienert, Naomi Klein, and Amy Eilberg, an American rabbi and activist. Right? Yuval Abraham, who co-directed No Other Land. Right? And that's the Oscar-winning film. And I believe that his Palestinian director was murdered by Israel. Basel Adra. If I do not put the point too simply, these people speak not for the destruction of Israel, but for the restoration for its restoration to sanity, and so its salvation. They don't mention the two-state solution in their letter, but one gains the impression it is this for which they hope. One may differ strenuously with them on these points, as I do emphatically, as do I. But what I will shorthand as their moderation is part of what makes their open letter so important. These, again, are shorthand mainstream Jews. I would dispute that. Gabor Mate, I cannot consider to be a mainstream Jew. I wish that were the truth, but he's still considered to be fringe, I would say, in his opposition of Israel. In even being the son of a Holocaust survivor, he still is not really mainstream. Most Jews don't even know who he is. At least none that I know. But who can say how carefully or how many presidents, prime ministers, UN reps will even consider this letter? I would guess not many. This isn't the salient point. I wonder if Jeffrey Sachs signed off on this letter. My guess would be yes. This letter marks out the significantly worsening alienation between world Jewry and the state that's supposed to represent its home. And in so doing, it widens and deepens the already evident isolation of the Jewish state, even though, again, it's not a Jewish state. This latter effect may not be the intent of the open letter signatories, but it will prove unmistakably to be among the document's consequences. Okay. Right? And it talks about, this letter says, we represent the growing consensus of world Jews, not the Israeli government, the letter declares in one of its subheads. Exactly so. And as the Guardian piece cited above points out, that the open letter should be read alongside some stunning numbers coming out of the most recent opinion polls. In a recent Washington Post survey, 61% of American Jews think that Israel has committed war crimes in Gaza. Again, I think the other 40% are fucking blind and lying to themselves or buried their head in the sands. Just under 40% stand with the open letter signatories. We witness a genocide. The other 60% are lying to themselves. Because if it were happening to anyone else, they would absolutely declare it to be a genocide. But because Israel's doing it, it's a double standard. And that's what pisses me off. On top of course, Israel murdering everyone there. In a poll that doesn't distinguish between Jews and non-Jews, the Brookings Institution, which I can't stand, mainstream Democratic Party bullshit, finds that 45% of those surveyed think that Israel is committing genocide. And remember, these are people that are trying to shoehorn their way into the opposite in results. They don't want even these results coming out. These are really bad for their donors and their constituents. I don't even know why they put them out, honestly. A recent poll conducted by Quinnipiac indicates 50% of registered voters agree. Among Democratic voters, the number is 77%. But yet, the checks continue to flow, just like 87% of Democrats want Medicare for all, and that shit ain't happening. 77% of American Democrats think that Israel is committing genocide, and yet the money continues to flow. On Thursday, Reuters published a survey indicating that 59% of the Jews and non-Jews polled think the U.S. should recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. Again, what does that mean exactly? What land do they actually get? Do they get to control a military? Do they get to elect themselves a government that actually can negotiate anything? Or are they just a puppet to be dictated to by D.C.? I think that that's really what they want, is recognizing it. And we talked about what recognizing it really means, which is bullshit. Giving them their own real state and allowing them to exist as a state is what we do. And the truth is the state should be all of it. And Israel should live side by side. Anyone that wants to live side by side with the Palestinians is free to stay. If you can't do that, the fuck out, because that ain't your home. Patrick continues, I see a highly significant conflict. Go ahead.
I never understood, like, I mean, you've talked about this too, like, technically with the Holocaust, wasn't, like, shouldn't we give them back Germany and, like, other parts of that region? You know?
Yes. And I believe that the excuse among Zionists, number one, is that it's too traumatic for the German Jews because they were genocided there, that to take that over and build a homeland on their bones is kind of fucked up. But to do it on the Palestinians' bones is no better.
I mean, it's their bones, like, right? Like, that's what I don't get.
Number one,
if you got to run the country that fucked you over like that,
you could build like, graveyards and museums and tributes and all. Yes. And not only that, but why wouldn't the United States at that point, if you're so insistent on the Jews having a homeland, give them North Dakota? Nobody gives a fuck about North Dakota anyway, right? Montana. Like, Uganda.
Knowing what they're willing to do now.
No, but they wanted Jerusalem.
If they did get, control over Germany, no, we know. But, like, they probably would have started putting the fucking Germans in the camps. Like,
right? And then there's the whole, Israeli, there's whole Jews committing terrorism in Islamic countries throughout the 1930s in order to justify and create this narrative that, hey, there's only one safe place. We have to build a safe place because there's nowhere else safe for Jews in the world. Right? So, again, Patrick continues that he sees a highly significant conflict growing ever sharper between the increasing number of outspoken Jews of conscience and those many, and they remain very many, who continue to defend the righteousness of the Israeli terror machine. These are getting especially awkward for mainstream media, such as the Zionist-supervised New York Times, and we did a long story about how Zionist they are, wherein we find no mention of Jews Demand Action in its forthright open letter. The paper of record decided not even to mention it. Like, who was it? Double Down News said that one of the things they do is they just choose to ignore it, and that's a tactic. This cannot end well for the Times and all the pilot fish that follow. However long the Times stays silent, however many media billionaire Zionists take over and corrupt, however many Barry Weisses they put in high places, and we've covered that too, this will do nothing other than discredit these media in time. It may work for now. They're effectively complicit in the Zionist defacement of the Judaic tradition. Not that they give a fuck. This is another way that the open letter is important. And again, you guys covered the history of Zionism. Theodore Herzl was an atheist. He wasn't even a Jew. The world has long and urgently needed to hear from the we whose names are on this letter. Non-Jews need to learn of and make the distinction between Judaism and the frenzied Zionism that now rules Israel, so they can think clearly of these questions. And as they are well aware, those Jews who reject Israel's ultra-nationalist Zionism must make themselves heard for the sake of Judaism too. My, again, question is, where the fuck have they been for 2 years? Because we've been talking about this for 2 years. I don't accept that any great wave of anti-Semitism is breaking upon us. I agree with that. There is no ferocious surge in Joe Biden's preposterous phrase, but the potential for such a turn, given the extent of Israel's inhumanity in combination with its claim to be the Jewish home, is obvious. The Zionist hordes love the threat of anti-Semitism. How well it serves their pernicious purpose. Shmuley is their absolute dream. At last, this insidious ruse is countered by those whose voices count most, the voices of Jews. And again, I disagree with this. The voices of Jews don't count most. Fuck that shit. Like, it's just the people that they're claiming to do this in the name of are finally speaking out and saying no. But again, where the fuck have you been for 2 years? It's about time is more like the way I would word this and phrase this, other than being so, oh my God, thank you so much. This is such a monumentous, important thing. My question is, where the fuck you been? And it's about fucking time. Welcome to the party, pal. All right. Next. We got Aalia Mauro. All right. 17 seconds. She was on one of these flotillas, by the way. Footage of Israel blowing up homes in Rafah today. The demolition and destruction has not stopped despite the quote-unquote ceasefire. Remember, what it means is that you cease and Israel continues to fire.
Yep.
There weren't people in there. They're just destroying the potential of living in anywhere that may be in those buildings. Disgusting. Ethnic cleansing. Genocide. Keep denying it. I don't give a fuck. Then we got this piece from Mondoweiss. Israel returns 195 bodies to Gaza, many mutilated with hands bound and signs of torture. Again, for anyone squeamish, we might have some pictures in this one that you might want to turn away from. But yes, Mastermind, I thought there were only supposed to be 140,000 chosen people. I don't even know if there are that many left at this point. Like, the whole story. I'm so disgusted by all of it. I just abolish religion entirely, I say. And that makes the Christians very upset. And I'm sorry to say, but more people have been murdered in the name of religion than anything else in the history of mankind. And it's pointless, useless, and it's gotten us nowhere. So the Gaza Ministry of Health published the photos of the mutilated bodies of the Palestinian prisoners. Most of them showed clear signs of torture, hands and feet bound, blindfolded, bodies showing marks of tank tracks, which we showed last week. All right. Burns, fractures, and deep wounds. This is from Tareq Hajjaj, and this was from Thursday. All right. Look at all those bodies. It's just disgraceful. The Gaza government media office announced on Wednesday morning the burial ceremonies of 54 unidentified Palestinian bodies that the Ministry of Health had received from Israel through the Red Cross as part of the ongoing exchange of deceased prisoners during ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, when Israel is continuing to murder Palestinians daily. Since it was impossible to identify the disfigured and mutilated bodies, they're all being buried in a mass grave, the government media office said. Since October 14th of this year, the Gaza Health Ministry has received the bodies of over 195 deceased Palestinian prisoners. Remember that they've been holding over 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli tortured prisons and dungeons, many without charge.
Yep.
Again, the majority of the bodies show clear signs of torture, including bullet holes fired from point-blank range, bruises, and signs of mutilation. Several bodies were received with their hands tied behind their backs, several more with blindfolds over their eyes. Health Ministry also said that several bodies showed signs of strangulation from hangings, with ropes found tied around the bodies' necks. Still, while others bore marks of tank tracks. Other bodies were found with missing organs, according to these health officials. Mondoweiss received, reviewed, and verified photographs of some of the mutilated bodies from the Gaza Ministry of Health. They are horrific and show clear signs of torture. The Ministry of Health has uploaded several photos and the mutilated bodies online and made them available to the families of people who went missing during the war in hopes that they might identify them. We strongly advise that readers proceed with extreme caution if viewing the Ministry of Health photos. They are extremely disturbing and graphic. And for those reasons, Mondoweiss has decided not to republish them, but sharing them on a link to a Google Drive folder there. I'm not going to show them. Of the 195 bodies, only 57 have been identified so far. During the burial ceremony of the 54 unidentified, the government media office's director said that the bodies that had been received were held for a period of 5 days to allow for forensic examinations. As rudimentary as they could possibly do, I'm guessing. When none of the families with missing loved ones were able to positively identify the bodies, they were handed over to the Department of Endowments for burial. Forensic teams found martyrs with their hands. We heard the quotes. They were buried in numbered graves in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza earlier this morning, between cinder blocks. Families whose loved ones went missing during the war have flocked to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the hopes of identifying them and finding some closure. Health authorities gather family members in large rooms and display pictures of the bodies. Again, we showed that last week. Richard Medhurst tweeted that out, showing them disfigured and mutilated. The families have to sit through the images and try to find identifying features on the bodies, which, can you imagine having to do that? In video testimony obtained from Mondoweiss, Wahaba Shabat stands in shock in Nasser Hospital after identifying the body of her son, Mahmoud Shabat, 34, who went missing on October 7th, 2023, more than 2 years. Wahaba later learned that Mahmoud had been one of the fighters who had crossed into Israel on that day. She says they want to honor him with a dignified burial. He chose this path and was free to do so. All we want to do is give him a final resting place, nothing more. Now I can say I am at peace after knowing what happened to my son. And remember that when a people are occupied, resistance is justified. So they can call him whatever they want to call him. He was a resistance fighter in the international community's eyes. Wahaba said that the body arrived naked, disfigured, showing signs of torture all over his body. His head was crushed, his face was shattered, and he had broken limbs. Yeah, and that's blurred out, thankfully. All right. When I saw pictures of the missing, I suspected that one of the photos might be of my son. I immediately came to the hospital after a family member showed me their photo on their phone. I examined his body and found the mark on his head that I knew would be there. He had been injured in the head during the Great March of Return in between 2018 and 19, a period in which Israel maimed, wounded, or killed over 30,000 Palestinians protesting at Gaza's border fence. Unarmed Palestinians walked up to the fence and were murdered, just mowed down once they got within a certain distance of the fence line. He underwent several operations and the scars remained. I recognized him immediately and collapsed with the sight of the condition his body arrived in. She explains that before identifying him, she had repeatedly described him to the doctors at Nasser Hospital until his identity was confirmed. Quote, I was shocked by the severity of the torture he suffered. All this torture on one young man. They even returned him naked without dignity, explaining that the signs were apparent because the body had not undergone decomposition as it had been frozen solid. So they've been holding him since October 7th in a freezer somewhere. His bones were fractured. His feet showed clear marks of being chained. His hands were tied behind his back. There was a bullet wound to his head, so he was executed. And a rope was around his neck. It was clearly visible they executed him without mercy. Waba went on to say that not a single bone had been left intact on his face. Even in the worst wars, torture doesn't reach this level, she said. The resistance took prisoners from the Israeli army to Gaza and kept them for 2 years. Look how they were returned to their families, alive, walking, talking, not mutilated or tortured to death. So why are only our prisoners killed in cold blood and returned to their families like this, broken and tortured, tied up and strangled? Because Amalek. That's why. Because Bibi Netanyahu, blame it on the Bibi. But not just the Bibi, the Likud and Gallant and Ben Gvir and all the hardline extremist terrorists. In the courtyard of the medical complex, Majaya Kadela stands in front of the main entrance. Lucky she didn't get bombed, staring at the photos of the bodies displayed by the Ministry of Health. Again, thankfully, we have a ceasefire, quote unquote, happening. She scrutinizes each image as she searches for her son who went missing since the afternoon again of October 7th. Whenever she hears new bodies have been returned, she immediately rushes to the hospital to see if her son's among them. They just want closure. They're these mothers. Even if they return a small piece of flesh, that'll be enough for me to honor and bury him. You just keep seeing this. Again, disfigured, beyond recognition. You keep seeing the same story over and over and over again. Fuck Israel. Now, we all know Indie Media Award honoree Lee Camp. He's been around a while, right? Lee Camp is incredibly censored and suppressed. But for some reason, they allowed this one to get through. And this one's got over 24,000 likes. It's the most I've seen him get in a long time, honestly. And it's not his map. This came from Al Jazeera. But he says, kind of amazing that Israel has ethnically cleansed over half of Gaza, and no one in our media mentions that Israel has ethnically cleansed over half of Gaza. All right? That this yellow line has now been established, and this is the new Gaza. Is this clear section beige inside the yellow line? That Israel has taken all of this territory, at least a mile or more in, from every line. In this case here, 0.9 miles right there. All right, near Deir al-Balah. But in other cases, 4 miles in the south. And of course, a mile and a quarter in from Rafah. That's a war crime. That's a war crime.
Yep. One of the many.
Then we have this one. I actually grabbed this from Israel-Palestine News, but this was one of the things that they referenced. Invasions, violations, and abductions across the West Bank. Like I said, this isn't happening just in Gaza, but it's also happening with impunity and without really people paying attention across the West Bank. Occupation forces and illegal paramilitary Israeli colonizers invaded multiple Palestinian cities, towns, and refugee camps across the occupied West Bank late Thursday evening and into Friday. Israeli forces abducted 4 Palestinian civilians in Hebron in the southern West Bank after invading their homes, conducting searches, and ransacking their belongings. So they move in the house, they trash it, conduct a search, and then they arrest without charge the people who own the home. Local sources identified that the detainees. Occupation forces also stormed several homes belonging to the Al-Atrash and Al-Rajabi families and others in Hebron. They erected multiple military roadblocks at the entrances to the city and its surrounding towns, villages, and refugee camps, and blocked several main and side roads using iron gates, concrete blocks, and earth mounds. So they're cutting them off street by street. Israeli soldiers also invaded Al-Farah refugee camp south of Tubas in northeastern West Bank. This is all illegal. They're not supposed to be doing any of this. And nobody's reporting it. Media sources reported, except for Israeli media, because they don't give a shit, that military patrols entered the camp from its northern area with infantry units spreading through its alleys. Several homes were stormed and ransacked, again, trashed, before the forces withdrew toward the Hamra military roadblock. So we'll just go in and trash your place and split. In addition, the army invaded Al-Qadir town, south of Bethlehem, focusing on the Al-Balu area, where they stormed and searched a residential apartment. No abductions there were reported. And you have footage, right, of vehicles arriving. And obviously, those are IDF. Hamas does not have vehicles like that. Right? In Tulkarem, in the northwestern West Bank, Israeli forces did abduct former political prisoner Malek Saada Jalad, 50, from the Urta suburb south of the city after breaking into his home and vandalizing its contents. Par for the course. Meanwhile, back in the Hall of Injustice, illegal Israeli paramilitary colonizers set fire to several civilian vehicles in Deir Dibwan, that's east of Ramallah in the central West Bank, right? So let's get footage of that. Local sources reported that colonizers attacked at the Al-Tal neighborhood and torched vehicles parked outside Palestinian homes. Where are you getting this stuff? Nobody else is reporting on this. In Nablus, in the northern West Bank, maybe Electronic Intifada, maybe the guys at Bet Beat, maybe Fiorella and Vanessa Bealey and Eva Bartlett. Nobody else is reporting this kind of stuff. Several armored Israeli military vehicles invaded the city in Nablus and Balata refugee camp, firing live rounds, gas bombs, and concussion grenades. Again, against a defenseless people for the most part. And you've got footage there. Through like a narrow alleyway because they don't want to get caught. On Friday morning, colonizers assaulted Palestinian olive harvesters in Beit Dajan, east of Nablus. The attack occurred in the Khalet al-Katil area north of town, where colonizers prevented farmers from continuing their harvest. I saw a horrible photo of a colonizer literally beating down a Palestinian woman for harvesting her olives. Olive pickers across the West Bank faced repeated assaults by colonizers and occupation soldiers who block access to farmland and obstruct harvesting. Last month alone, Israeli colonizers carried out 490 documented violations targeting Palestinian villages and Bedouin communities. And nobody's going to do shit about it. These attacks are concentrated in Hebron Governorate, 127, Ramallah Governorate, 122, and Nablus, another 115. Again, who's stopping this? Palestinian Authority is supposedly working with people, right? Then we have this video. This is a woman named Leila Hegzy. She was on one of the flotillas. She's got 2 minutes talking about what it was like to be in an Israeli camp in the prison. Let me turn this up and go.
I'm here to record a message in my jammies because that's how I plan to live for a little while. And before I can organize my thoughts on what it was actually like being in Israeli detention, and of course talk more about that because we need to get every single Palestinian hostage out of these horrific conditions, I want everyone to know about a banner that was hung up in the women's prison in the yard. It's likely an AI-generated image. It shows the ruins of Gaza, rubble on one side, rubble on the other side, and then through the rubble, there's like this path where I'm presuming that Israeli soldiers are the ones walking through it. It's kind of hard to tell because it's like an aerial view. It's like this weird, hopeful sky, like a new dawn kind of sky, if you can imagine this. And in Arabic, on the banner, it says the new Gaza. And then, of course, underneath this banner, there's like a giant Israeli flag in the yard. They want Palestinian hostages to see this when they're detained. And obviously it's in Arabic for a reason.
Psychological torture.
I've been saying the quiet part out loud for so long. So if this doesn't show you that it's never been about Hamas, it's never been about hostages, Israeli hostages, it's never been about any of the things that they say it's about, and that it's only an attempt to ethnically cleanse Palestine. Here's your evidence. Obviously, I was in prison, so I can't show you a picture of this banner, but it was there. And yeah, I want to hear more of the prisoners, hostages who were in detention with me talking about this, because this shit is insane. These people are insane. It's a depraved society, and the world needs to know. So, I'm here.
Yep. So, I
I
wanted
heard
to bring
somewhere
that.
a saying about
In my jammies.
uh
That's how I.
they cry in Hebrew, lie in English, and threaten in Arabic. Right?
Hmm.
Like,
Powerful.
and that's the only time they ever use Arabic is
I would say that they cry in English, threaten in and then
as well.
yeah. They're bombastic in Hebrew and threaten in Arabic for
Right.
sure. But sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of being in captivity, this guy, and this is a really long article. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. Margaret Flowers, who is the editor over at Popular Resistance, another Indie Media Award honoree 2022, one of the best outlets out there still. She shared this to her Facebook. I had seen it. It came through, I believe, also on the Indie News Now website. Welcome to Hell, Remembrances of Time in an Israeli Prison. And there are actually two parts to this article. This is just one part, and you can see how long it is. All right, this is from the Gaza Freedom Flotilla Shipmates on the Conscience. This was, I believe, from the most recent flotilla, right? All roads lead to Ketziot. I believe that's the prison, right? And he talks about some of the conditions, right? That they loaded the bus with us. Don't take your blindfold off. They have a camera. They're recording everything we're saying. I recognize the voice of the activist sitting next to me. He's a big guy, well over 6 feet tall. I was squashed into the corner of the last row of the bus. I tried to sit sideways to get more room. The steel seats of the bus made that difficult. It was uncomfortable. At least they didn't zip tie my hands too tightly. It must have been well after midnight when the bus started moving. We were all tired. I dozed fitfully, the whine of the bus transmission in my ears. At one point, I woke up in a panic. I had removed my blindfold while half asleep. The camera. I desperately tried to refit the blindfold over my eyes with clumsily zip-tied hands. It worked. Thankfully, no guards appeared. I guess no one was monitoring the camera very closely. Perhaps the guards were asleep as well. And of course, now we just dropped the frame. How to sleep in such conditions, right? It's simply a question of exhaustion. My head pitched forward, chin to my chest. I was going to get some rest. Just at that point, the bus hit a huge pothole and my face slammed down on the back of the seat in front of me. Ow. I bit my lip quite badly. I tasted blood. The inside of my lip was shredded. I was thankful I didn't break any teeth. There would be no more sleep on this ride. And this begins again his time in an Israeli torture prison. All right, I ate my jelly sandwich under the cover of darkness in our cell. Right, nothing from the Israelis, certainly a valid point. Right. We were finally led to our cell. It stank of urine, consisted of 4 bunk beds in a room and a separate bathroom with a filthy toilet. There was a sink with a working faucet, which was our source of water for washing and drinking. There was a camera on the back wall mounted up high, close to the ceiling. We were being observed. We received towels, a small toothbrush, toothpaste, and 3 small packets of liquid soap, which proved impossible for me to open. Of course, the bunks were noisy because they were supported by a steel sheet that flexed when one rolled over in bed. Boom! It sounded like a poorly constructed gong or something. I quickly learned to lie still. So I'm not going to, again, read this whole article. This is a long story, and if you want to get triggered and read just how bad it is, how bad it was for the people that were in these prisons, go read this over at Popular Resistance. Fuck Israel for that. And also for this, from Dave DeCamp at Anti-War News, not a surprise, though they'll deny it, Israel has only allowed a fraction of the agreed-upon aid to enter Gaza, according to the World Food Program. Again, that's Jose Andres. That's CIA-friendly brother. All right, and this was from Tuesday. Israel has allowed just a fraction of the agreed-upon number of aid trucks to enter Gaza under the ceasefire deal, according to officials in the Strip. They have no reason to lie. Under the ceasefire agreement, Israel pledged to immediately allow the commencement of full entry of humanitarian aid and relief, at minimum of consistent with the January ceasefire deal, under which they agreed then to allow 600 a day. According to Gaza's government media office, Israel has allowed just 15% of the trucks to enter. And remember, they're still all lined up at the Rafah gate. They're sitting on the Egyptian border waiting to come in. We confirmed that the total number of humanitarian aid trucks that have entered the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire has reached 986 out of the 6,600 that were supposed to enter until Monday evening, according to what's agreed upon. Now remember, though, that this resolution was not agreed upon by Israel or Hamas. They didn't sign it. Data from UN 2720 Monitoring and Tracking Dashboard, which is a mechanism created last year to monitor aid shipments into Gaza, shows that from October 10th until the 21st, only 853 aid trucks have reached their intended destination in Gaza. Isn't that nice? The media office added that on average, 89 trucks were entering Gaza per day. That's 1/6. The continued policy of strangulation, starvation, and humanitarian blackmail practiced by the occupation. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The UN World Food Program has also said that food supplies to Gaza have ramped up since the ceasefire, but are still well below the target. They said its target was for 2,000 tons of food to enter Gaza per day, but only 750 are entering. We've been able to get this to scale up. All right. In order to do that, we have to use every border crossing point right now. But of course, just 2 of the Israeli-controlled border crossings were operational, one in central Gaza and one in the south. Oh, okay. But they still have yet to open Rafah. So all those trucks that are sitting in Rafah could come in if Israel just opened that up. And if they did, I believe they might still have to bulldoze a road now because they've bombed the entire road. Etefa added that the food supplies that have entered Gaza are enough to feed 500,000 people, or a quarter of Gaza's population, or about, I would say, a third, for 2 weeks. And that many people are rationing because they fear that the supplies are going to be cut off again. They eat part of it. They ration and keep some of the supplies for an emergency because they're not very confident how long the ceasefire will last and what will happen next. And who can blame them? Man, fuck Israel for all of this. It's just depraved. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. I don't even have the words to describe all of it. And let's not forget the complicity of the U.S. and the UK, namely, and this is in Indie Media Award honoree Declassified UK, continuing their coverage of the spy plane missions, which remain active in Cyprus after the Gaza mission ends, right? So aircraft contracted to look for hostages continues to fly from the UK base despite the ceasefire, with drones also spotted. Why are these drones and why are these planes circling Cyprus? That's weird. A spy plane hired by Britain's Ministry of Defense to surveil Gaza has continued flights over the main Mediterranean after its mission ended last week. But what's interesting again is that the manned spy plane is known as Crook 12 is owned by the Sierra Nevada Corporation, which I still contend likely has some connections to Israel, Adelson, Mossad, etc., etc. Allegedly. I have not found any direct evidence and links, but I haven't dug any very deeply. My guess is they're not even trying to hide it. It spent several hours flying in circles off the coast of Cyprus this Monday, and last Friday, Royal Air Force drones have also been operating in the same area since the ceasefire. What are they doing out here? Oh, and how interesting that they go into a five-point star pattern also. Crooks 12 was part of a fleet of planes used by Britain's Royal Air Force to surveil Gaza since December of 2023. And Declassified has reported on this before, as we covered on this show. Officially looking for hostages, no information has been released about whether they found anyone, with mounting concern that intelligence shared with Israel could have contributed to attacks on civilians. Could have. Its sister plane, Crook 11, once left its tracker on over Gaza, revealing it flew just 3 streets away from a house that was bombed by Israel hours later, killing 34 civilians. Quote, the faces of dead children were crushed in a way that no mind or heart can describe. If there's evidence that a British recon plane participated in the massacre committed against us, then Britain is complicit in the genocide. Of course! Not to quote a horse-loving douchebag named King. This pair of Crook planes appeared on flight tracking websites between Cyprus and Gaza 133 times since they were first deployed in December of 2024, Declassified has found. That's a lot. The Royal Air Force has deployed its own fleet of Shadow R1 surveillance planes over 600 times from Cyprus during the war in Gaza, or you mean the massacre orchestrated by Israel in Gaza, according to research by the charity Action on Armed Violence. This suggests, again, that the Ministry of Defense could have launched as many as 739 surveillance sorties relating to Gaza, meaning 739 instances of potential war crimes. The data can't be comprehensive because the Crook planes often restricted the visibility of their trackers, and because they're American planes, they can't be held to a standard. 2 further flights since the ceasefire suggest the Ministry of Defense may intend to keep operating surveillance flights in the Eastern Mediterranean. What a shock! Defense Secretary John Healey said this week that a small team of British military personnel have been sent to Israel to help with monitoring the ceasefire. Sure, Jan, that's what they're there for. Quote, without boots on the ground, the team is likely to rely on a combination of drones, surveillance aircraft, satellites, and other sensors to keep watch for any breaches, the Times reported. And oh yeah, the trust me bro from Israel that they always take. It comes as at least 2 RAF Protector drones were seen on a flight tracking website flying from Akrotiri, Britain's airbase in Cyprus. As far as it's publicly known, these flights are the first for RAS Protector RG-1s outside of the UK or US airspace. That's significant. Campaign group Genocide Free Cyprus said on Instagram that the drone flights extend British military influence from a colonial foothold and ensure that the UK remains a key player in regional surveillance, which is exactly what it's trying to do. 3% of Cyprus remains British occupied, despite the island becoming independent in 1960. Were you aware of that? I did not know that.
No, I had no idea.
Referring to the manned spy flights, a defense analyst who asked not to be named told Declassified, quote, "I'm still deeply mystified as to why the Israelis needed any intelligence that these planes could detect over Gaza. Mostly because they wanted complicity. They wanted somebody else to do their dirty work for them. It's not a big secret that the Israelis have fleets of drones and signals intelligence and troops on the ground. They have way more capability than anything that those planes could have. Yes, but they also have Israeli flag markings." The Ministry of Defense has refused to answer the questions in Parliament about its contractual relationship with Sierra Nevada. How convenient. Let me guess, citing national security concerns? The Ministry of Defense previously told Declassified that surveillance flights were unarmed, don't have a combat role, and were solely focused on securing the release of the hostages. Sure, Jan.
Sure they were.
They said that the UK
they've been doing that for the last,
2 years?
8 months or whatever it is. Right.
There you go. Las Vegas Sands Corp has reached a deal with federal prosecutors to pay more than $47 million to the U.S. government in order to avoid criminal charges over alleged money laundering activities. That would be the Adelson family that operates in Vegas but doesn't own any hotels in Vegas anymore. They operate hotels in Macau. Thank you, Seven Side, for that. Good night. Revolution continues. Good to see you. Again, the UK claims that they control what information is passed on, and only information relating to hostage rescue, broad term, is passed to the relevant Israeli authorities. We will only pass information where we're satisfied that it will be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. Or where we have plausible deniability. That's the other thing that they won't mention. Fuck Israel. Fuck England. And I heard Monica Perez on the latest Cognitive Dissonance talked about it, and she said it's really a triangle. It's a trifecta between the US, the UK, and Israel. It's the three of them operating in tandem and in consortium with each other. This is another disgraceful fucking video that I wanted to bring real quick. Let's turn the slideshow off, go full screen. This is a mother clinging to the grave that's being bulldozed by the IDF of her son. You see the bulldozer back there behind them.
Yep.
They're digging up graves of Palestinians. And they're going to read what they're going to do to this area in a second. It's so awful. I mean, half of me, honestly, is surprised that they didn't kind of execute her on the spot and film it. Disgustingly enough.
Yeah.
There they are digging up. I had one more thing to show. All right. And let's turn off the slideshow. Let's turn it back on. Come on. So I'm not showing my screen. This came again from Indie Media Award honoree 2024, Ricky at Council of State Media. The number one cause of child death on Earth in 2025 is Israel. Read that again. Then read that again. Fuck Israel. And that concludes our Fuck Israel segment for the evening. So thank you for sticking with me on that. We certainly will not be remonetized by YouTube for calling all that out. So again, if you're able to, and it means, please support the media you want to see and support channels like this that show you things that are not being shown on corporate media. That's why we go to independents and sources that go as directly as possible. Ways to support this channel: Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, at indienewsnow.com, where we're live. We have a live section there, but we also have a support the media and keep the media free. And that's where you can do a Stripe donation. Also over at Substack, monthly or annual, you can do a contribution there at indiemediatoday.com or at innnewsletter.com. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I love you all. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Mwah. Ciao, baby.
I'll be back.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you